Welcome, gentle viewer. Recently we saw the movie The Case for Christ and expected it to be an apologetic film, and we were not disappointed. Unfortunately, copies of the book were not available at the library, so our commentary is limited to the movie. Similar to the rambling atheistic writings of the Church Fathers, the movie discusses the crucifixion, the 500 witnesses, early martyrs, and other trivial points that have nothing relevant to the resurrection. Whether or not Nietzsche had problems with his Lutheran minister father is irrelevant to our inquiry. Nietzsche was a competent philologist, so when he writes that difficulties lurk behind every New Testament word, the reader should take notice. Of course, reasonable people may disagree with Nietzsche's criticisms of modern Christianity. As Apprentice Tyler correctly observed many years ago, the two parts of modern Christianity are recruiting and fundraising. We have repeatedly discussed our skepticism of atheist positions, since these claims require knowledge, or assumptions, or revelations, beyond human reason. We are not surprised that atheists can become theists and vice versa. However, we suspect that intellectually honest individuals, or agnostics, never change their opinions, as conclusive evidence either for God or against God is forever lacking. In conclusion to this part, not knowing, or ignorance, is not an attractive quality in individuals, and fatal for film protagonists, as there is no drama for someone to honestly state for 2 hours that they don't know. Moving on. We are told that there are over 5,400 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, as compared to the handful of manuscripts of Plato and Aristotle, among other ancient authors. Initially, this seems like significant evidence for the antiquity of the Bible, but in reality this number is not extraordinary, as Bible in Eastern Europe were still being copied by hand as late as the 19th century. The Sinai Codex was found in the 1840s and is dated to the 4th century, and is considered the oldest and most extensive biblical manuscript in existence. For whatever reasons, the monks at the monastery did not appreciate this supposedly ancient text, as it was rescued from the trash. Moving on. As stated in the movie, the central issue is the resurrection, and no one, according to the Gospels, saw the resurrection. In Matthew 28:6, the angel says, "He is not here." In Mark 16:6, the young man says, "He is not here." In Luke 24:6, two men say, "He is not here." In the fourth Gospel, Mary Magdalene sees the stone removed from the entrance and leaves to find Simon Peter. Therefore, there are no witnesses to the resurrection. However, there are witnesses to the risen Christ. Both Matthew 26:48 and Mark 14:43 relate that Judas identified Jesus so that the soldiers could arrest him. Yet Jesus taught to the crowds and in the temple for many years, so thousands of people and possibly hundreds of Roman soldiers had seen him. Should we conclude that, regardless of their military discipline and other abilities, Roman soldiers, as a whole, were incapable of remembering faces? I have repeatedly related my inability to distinguish apprentices Braden and Denver, whether together or individually. Yet my interactions with them are more than casual observations. If Jesus were a twin, we would expect the soldiers would need help identifying him. The purpose of identification satisfactorily explained Judas's role. Interestingly, there is an indication of a twin in the Gospel of John. Chapter 11, verse 16, and chapter 21, verse 2 tells the reader that the Apostle Thomas was called Didymus, which means Thomas called twin, or, since Thomas means twin, twin called twin. Moving on. In Matthew 27:27 and John 18:3, we read that a band of soldiers arrested Jesus. These translations tell the reader nothing, but once we learn that a cohort is 600 men, simple division tells us that for every apostle, Pilate sent 50 men. The gentle viewer can determine for himself if this number was inadequate, sufficient, or overkill. Moving on. Since the purpose of crucifixion, like hanging, is death, we will assume that the crucifixion was deadly. But was Jesus on the cross remains a valid question. In both Matthew 27:32 and Mark 15:21, state the soldiers compelled Simon to carry Jesus' cross and gave him vinegar and crucified him. The pronouns him apply to the noun Simon, not to Jesus. Luke also has Simon carry the cross, but keeps the narrative on Jesus, so there is no confusion who is being crucified. John does not relate that Simon carried the cross. However, chapter 19, verse 23 states the soldiers divided Jesus' garments into 4 parts, one for each soldier. Therefore, there are 4 soldiers at the crucifixion. The general viewer can decide if this number of soldiers is sufficient to ensure order, to prevent zealots from rescuing Jesus. Moving on. All Gospels agree that the charge against Jesus was his claim to be king of the Jews. It was written in Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. Since Herod was king, any legitimate claim of kingship would be treason. The Latin abbreviation INRI is still seen on Roman crucifixes. However, in the Orthodox Church, the title above the cross is King of Glory. John 6:15 tells that when Jesus realized that the people were going to make him king, he left them. Later, in John 12:13, Jesus is proclaimed as the King of Israel on his entrance into Jerusalem. Judah is not synonymous with Israel. Since Israel did not exist, there was no concern with sedition. The actual charge was not being king of Israel, a non-existent country, but of being king of the Jews, the position occupied by Herod. Interestingly, in the 4th Gospel, unlike the other 3 Gospels, Pilate doesn't ask Jesus if he is the king of the Jews. Moving on. Apologetics rightfully remains a minor aspect of modern Christianity, as any serious inquiry into the origins of Christianity or evidence for the resurrection will be met with an impenetrable wall. Ultimately, all that we know about Christianity's origins is found either in books or in tradition. There are no other facts. Whereas modern Christians know that they are saved, it is ironic that they cannot know the origins of their sacred texts. The resurrection remains central to Christianity, just as Atlantis' sinking is integral to that story. Of course, there are only 2 versions of Atlantis, and both are from Plato. Therefore, all that has been written about Atlantis that are not quotations from Plato is speculation and supposition. The general viewer may wish to know yours truly's position regarding the case for Christ, and as always, my opinions are worthless. Gratefully, we have facts, not opinions. I have not denied that I'm a Christian any more than I have denied I'm an American. Various people have suggested that I'm an atheist or a Satanist. Interestingly, they have never claimed that I'm not an American, although there is no evidence that can be independently verified that I was born in America. In conclusion to this part, theology is our friend. I have freely discussed historical Christianity with certain individuals who do not have opinions, lest I run in vain. At times I have discussed historical Christianity reluctantly with those individuals who not only have opinions, but convictions on what Christianity is and what it is not. Because I don't understand the modern importance of getting saved, I have never sought anyone's salvation. Frankly speaking, I don't care. For those of us with more than a passing knowledge of verifiable history, we rightly question both the validity of getting saved and its resultant worldview, the tribalism of us versus them. In conclusion, attempting to use the Bible as evidence results in more skepticism than without it. As always, the general listener will reach his own informed conclusions regarding both historical Christianity and modern Christianity.